Good day everyone. This is the continuation of Contracts, Chapter 3. Form for enforceability of contract. In the cases of contracts covered by the Statute of Frauds, the law requires that they be in writing subscribed by the party charged or by his agent. If the contract is not writing, the contract is not valid, assuming all the essential elements are present. But, upon the objection of a party, it cannot be proved and therefore it cannot be enforced unless it is ratified. Reasons for exceptions. According to the Code Commission, Article 1356 combines the spiritual system of the old civil code and the principles of the Anglo-American law as manifested in the Statute of Frauds. The foundation is still the spiritual system, so that in general, the contracting parties may, under Article 1357, compel each other to comply with the form required by law. The requirement that certain contracts be in certain forms to be valid or enforceable is calculated to avoid litigation. Oral contracts frequently lead to fraud in the fulfillment of obligations or to false testimony. So long as the possibility of dishonesty exists in contractual relations, the spiritual system cannot be adopted in an unqualified manner. If the form required for validity or enforceability of contract is not observed, the parties cannot avail of the right granted under an Article 1357. Form for the convenience of the parties. In the certain cases, a certain form is required for the convenience of the parties in order that the contract may be registered in the proper registry to make effective, as against third persons, the right acquired under such contract. Non-compliance with the required form would not adversely affect the validity nor enforceability of the contract between the parties themselves. As between the parties, the form is not indispensable since they are allowed by law to compel the other to observe the proper form, and this right may be exercised simultaneously with the action to enforce the contract. It is essential, however, before a party may be compelled to execute the required form, that the contract be both valid and enforceable. Examples. First, S donated real property to B in a private instrument. The donation is void because a donation of real property is required to be in a public instrument to be valid. Hence, Article 1357 does not apply. Next, suppose the contract is a sale of real property but it is entered into orally. The contract is valid but it is unenforceable because the law requires that it be in writing to be enforceable. Hence, Article 1357 will not also apply. If the price has been paid or the property has been delivered, the contract is valid and enforceable because the Statute of Frauds applies only to executory contracts. An exchange of land is valid although not in writing. Next, if the contract of sale is in private writing, then it is valid and binding, although it is still executory, but only as between the parties and not as against third persons without notice until the sale is registered in the registry of property. If B is the vendee, he has a right to compel S to put the contract in a public instrument so that it can be registered to affect third persons, notwithstanding the absence of express agreement between them to that effect. For a sale of a real property or of an interest therein to be enforceable under the Statute of Frauds, it is enough that it be in writing. It need not be notarized. Article 1358. The following must appear in a public document. First, acts and contracts which have for their object the creation, transmission, modification, or extinguishment of real rights over immovable property. Sales of real property or of an interest therein are governed by Articles 1403 number 2 and 1405. Next, the cession, repudiation or renunciation of hereditary rights or of those of the conjugal partnership of gains. Third, the power to administer property, or any other power which has for its object an act appearing or which should appear in a public document or should prejudice a third person. Fourth, the cession of actions or rights proceeding from an act appearing in public document. All other contracts where the amount involved exceeds 500 pesos must appear in writing, even a private one. But sales of goods, chattels, or things in actions are governed by Articles 1403, number 2, and 1405. Contracts which must appear in a public document. The contracts covered by this article are valid and enforceable, though not embodied in a public document or instrument or in writing. The public document is required only for the convenience and greater protection of the parties, and registration is needed only to make the contract effective as against third persons. In other words, the law does not require accomplishment of certain acts or contracts in a public instrument in order to validate the act or contract, but only to ensure its efficacy, so that after the existence of the act or contract has been admitted or established, the party bound may be compelled to execute the document. Formal requirements are, therefore, for the benefit of third parties for the purpose of informing as well as binding them. Non-compliance therewith does not adversely affect the validity of the contract nor the contractual rights and obligations of the parties thereunder. Incidentally, a public document or instrument is one which is acknowledged before a notary public or any official authorized to administer oath by the person who executed the same. The party making the acknowledgement formally declares that the instrument is his free act and deed, while the officer taking the same attests and certifies that such party is known to him and that he is the same person who executed the instrument, and acknowledge that the instrument is his free act and deed. Any other instrument is private. A private document, however, acquires the character of a public document when it becomes part of an official record and is certified by public officer duly authorized by law.